They did not turn this.
Go across to the side of the street.
I'm not going to cause any difficulty.
Talk to
Well, that in writing, please, councillor.
Yep.
Thank you.
I can, but I can't write.
Draw a picture. Kia ora. Excuse me. It's going to be one of those days, so what would stop me talking? Right, kia ora. Welcome to Strategy and Policy Monday, 24th Feb. We'll start with a karakia. Ena rangatira tēnā koutou. Ko taumau ki te tautoko kaupapa o te rā. Nō reira tēnā rā koutou katoa. Do we have any apologies? Yes, we do. We have Councillor Morrison, Mr. Stuart Ball and Suzanne Wakefield. Any other apologies? Should be something like to move those.
I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. Seconded, Councillor Rodway. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Oh, just to thank you, past. Any objections? Just a point on the voting. Because we are live streaming, it's really important that you either say something or raise your hand to indicate so that the record shows that you did actually vote. So just a point for as we go through the day, please make sure that you do an audible vote or a visual vote.
You both.
Yes, yeah, or even as long as even you can see your mouth moving the right way is probably in the right way. Don't say other things. Thank you. Right, thank you. Any declarations of interest other than the standing? Right. No, I've got no public forums today or petitions, deputations. So we move on to item 5, which is the confirmation of minutes. Thank you very much. Of the, what was that date? 12th of December. Seems like a really long time ago. Anybody?
Move in June.
Thank you, Chairman Horrell. Seconder for that, please. Thank you. Fail. Any changes or errors?
Matters arising.
We can discuss. Yes.
Well, I had a question at that meeting.
Yes, you did.
I wondered how you progressed. You gave me.
I was about to make a confession that I've not done it. So my apologies. I've raised it up my list of to-do things, and I will do it. I'll start that straight after this. Actually, my apologies for that. It just slipped out of, and it slipped out of our actions list. So yeah. So apologies for that. Anything else? That's what I
Madam Chair, item 10.1 about land use change to forestry says another paper will be presented to the committee in the new year regarding the policy aspects. Is that anything that's likely to happen?
Yes, through you, Chair, we will be aiming for the next meeting, which is the 2nd of April, and Manawhenua Rex were unable to attend today due to a clash at Tamarama, so we've carried a few of the bigger policy decisions through to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Just regarding what Morris just said, is there an opportunity to have some councillor input into some of those questions at the front end of that report?
Yes, actually, a proposal would be maybe rather than go straight to the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting on the 2nd of April to actually workshop and then bring the report through to the meeting after that. So we can absolutely do that either way.
Seems to be a bit of nodding for a workshop, so
Yes.
councillors are happy with another commitment in their diaries. We will try and do that. Anything else? I've had a mover and a seconder, so I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Well done. Against? Thank you. Carried.
Fast learners.
Yeah. Who'd have thought, eh?
Madam Chair, just a point if I may. If you are going to say against, then presumably that covers if viewers haven't seen you say that you voted for it. So is it so important? I wonder, because you've got to follow up, haven't you?
Yeah, I think so. Just for cleanliness of, and if anybody questioned a vote, or if there was a split vote, it's really important. It really had a true record in my view. So as being my role. That is what I'm asking you to do.
After a vote, if everybody's in agreement, you say agreed,
Yes.
and if there's a split vote, you say carried, and that will indicate to.
Yes, that's not the point. Actually, it's about being visibly engaged in the meeting also.
Right.
I would prefer if we did it that way, and then everybody is safe. And shouldn't be a big deal, actually. Thank you. Right, so let's move on to the, there's no notice of extraordinary or urgent business, and I've had no questions. Is there any councillors' reports? Is this what this paper is here?
Oh, yes, Madam
Yeah.
Chair.
Thanks.
This World Wetlands Day field trip was held yesterday, organised by Environment Southend. Councillor Gibson was there along with myself. I don't know if you've all had an opportunity to read it because it was only sent out yesterday afternoon.
I have not.
This site holds a bit of emotional content for me because it was when I first went duck shooting. Not that I'm really a duck shooter, but the ponds on this property were initially developed by Hamish Pinckney's father, John, and Hamish is managing the farm now. But John and his friends, Ted Tapper and Roger Sutton, who were all either employees of Fish and Game or councillors with Fish and Game, all built these ponds and mainly for duck hunting. So we had very good reports from council staff, Nate and Rob and Darren, all about these wetlands. They presented themselves very well, very knowledgeable, and the information was very useful, I thought. Then after that, there was discussion about how the current water plan rules and national policy statements make it difficult to establish wetlands and how frustrating this was. And we talked about that at some length around this table. And it really is a roadblock at the moment to get wetlands established. James Holloway from Brown Nurseries was there talking about different kinds of plants. The attendance was, in my view, very disappointing. There were only 6 people that I counted, other than staff, councillors or speakers who were there. And four of those people were committed wetlanders, they're farmers who built lots of wetlands on their place. So there was a couple there that I didn't know. But besides that, there's quite a lot of effort gone into this. Very poor turnout in my view. So, and the other thing is that while staff can provide assistance to individual farmers to build wetlands and tell them whether they need a consent or not, or if the consent needs something they have to pay for, that's really a very small proportion of the wetlands that really we need to get built on in South. All this stuff in the news recently about 2,000 hectares being lost in the last decade or so. So while it's good for our staff to be involved with individual farmers, and even if we can get farmers that are keen to do it and we can get over the hurdles, there's a huge mind shift that needs to occur in the community about building wetlands. It's not only because might be a perceived barrier to building them because of the consent problem, but also the benefits of wetlands as well generally in the community. There's a sector of the community, farming community, that see that they are beneficial from a whole lot of points of view, and they get that. But there's a really large, seems to me anyway, a really large proportion of the population that really, don't think that they are very good or they're harmful to their business or not useful. So, there's some really big challenges to get over to really get wetland building going on a large scale in the region. And so, we have to do something different from what we're doing now. I'm not sure what it is, but what we're doing now is not really working.
Thanks, Councillor. I've got, excuse me, Councillor Guyton and then Chairman Horrell and Councillor Gibson. Did Chair Vanda?
Can I just make an addition to what Morris was saying,
Yes, I can.
because I
Yes, you
was
can.
there
Yes, you
for the
can.
whole time.
Yeah, that's perfect.
We looked a wee bit silly, I thought, simply because we look at Marlborough and people were, the few that were there, were up with that and that the wetlands were going to be put in, although they had to have a small catchment area. Sometimes that's not understood. And one of our speakers said that, you know, the lawyers said that we can't do this. And to me, that's the wrong message getting out. And I concur with Morris that we've got to see a way through this. And although I wasn't here last Wednesday, I was called away to another scrap. Then basically we've got to, and I understood that we were going to set up a system that wetlands could be constructed, and if a consent was needed, there'd be no charge. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got to get into something like that and get that information out there, because everybody keeps saying, well, the lawyers say we can't, but we want an outcome of clean water and biodiversity.
Thank you. Good point. Councillor Gibbs, Guyton, sorry.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yes, on receiving your report, Morris, I did a little bit of searching and found on the internet a very interesting interview about wetlands. Admittedly, it was American, it was released. And I sent it around to all of the councillors kind of as a follow-up to this. But what I took from that was their focus on shallow waters and their again, focus on not losing wetlands in the first place because they're so subtly arranged, whereas the kind of wetlands we're talking about, and you talked about the drivers behind the ones that you're involved in, being duck hunters, building ponds, basically, was very different from this other model. I wonder if you've sensed anything in when you went here in your discussions about wetlands, because I can also see that perhaps a multitude of shallow wetlands might not need to be consented at all. Has this been considered rather than a dugout, bringing in the diggers and making a series of ponds, which is creating the problem that you're talking about, Councillor? What are the potentials for a multitude of shallow, more natural wetlands being explored for South Wellington? Oh, sorry, that's a question for you.
Oh, right.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, as was pointed out by Mark Sutton in particular, that these ponds, even though they've been built for duck hunting, they've got a range of values. So those particular ponds, and a lot of the ponds that Fish and Game have been involved with in the past, is finding a tile drain or an artificially dug drain on a farm and putting a low dam on that somewhere so that the water level is lifted up. Fish and Game, I know because obviously I worked there for a long time, but quite not strongly against, but recommend that digging a pond with a digger is a very poor way of creating a pond. It's deep and steep sides, and it costs a lot of money, and it's just by building a low dam on an artificial water course or a tile drain, it doesn't actually need a resource consent, although Darren said that even if an artificial drain has some native vegetation in it, like a carrot sector or some flaxes or something, then and that's going to be drowned. Well, that's a problem. So that's the sort of thing. But yeah, actually, and Darren said he agreed the best way to build wetlands is to find a suitable hollow that's got a watercourse of some sort in it, not a natural watercourse, obviously, but an artificial source of water. Then you can go ahead and do that. That's what they're encouraging.
There's lots of good discussions to be had on that, I think.
I think also, Councillor Guyton, the discussions went round the fact that we've got to produce these wetlands, just as you're saying. And just there's a change out there. People aren't quite so keen on building them for duck shooting now. They're wanting to do it for biodiversity and for, although they didn't mention it, and I was sadly disappointed, for cleansing water.
Thank you, Chairman Horrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on that, I think the RMA changes may actually aid some of this in the future. There seems to be a focus on getting rid of regulation that's stopping people doing stuff. But good to hear that conversation. I think any wetland's a good wetland, but as Morris has said, we've got our own rules, sort of less than 20,000 litres, less than 4 metres, which I think is permitted activity still. But often some of those things can be quite a bit less. It might just be a bit of a bund, but actually creates a wetland. So I think we need to get a bit more publicity out there, because we know this is a barrier at the moment too, and in the minds of people who would like to do something, they're thinking we're going to have to do something quite expensive. But also like to report on at the Mariah Bluff on Friday, we had the island predator-free presentations, which was pretty inspiring. You had people from the Chathams, obviously Rakiora, and the Auckland Islands. These are significantly sized islands. This is a real challenge going forward. But good to see the number of people in the room, and also good to see people with philanthropic money that are actually interested in these projects. And I think that is one of the keys going forward, is actually if we can get people to put money in to actually help. I still think we're going to need some more tools in the toolbox to actually achieve these goals. But it was a very good day, very informative, and a lot of people in DOC obviously, but it was quite a wide range of people at the Mariah there on Friday. So it's encouraging, because one of our planks that we're pretty keen on seeing making progress. But there is a bit of frustration, I guess, in the lack of tools and people that are anti-1080. And we are going to need more tools in the toolbox, I think, to actually crack some of that stuff in some of that very difficult country. But no, it was a good day.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to go back to the wetland conversation, a couple of points from me. That wetlands are not all created equal, right? There's all sorts of different ways to do. So we have to remember, I suppose, when we're encouraging people to do things, that there are, just like people, there are a variety of wetlands, and we need a variety of tools in the toolbox. And having an accessible portal, I think we talked about that ages ago. I think Councillor Morrison would be going on about that today if he was here. So there's work, there's possibilities. It's quite exciting, actually, I think, the wetlands conversation. Just need to get it all in one place, in my view. Anyway.
Just perhaps add, Chair, so obviously last Wednesday we touched on the Action on the Ground work program and the targets for wetland restoration and creation that have been set through that. We will be coming back for a deep dive looking at the different levers. We've obviously talked previously about the 2025 plan change and the opportunity to look at the regulatory barriers to wetland construction through that. But also other levers like consent fee waiver, etc. There's been work happening, as we will be bringing that back to you shortly.
Thanks, Rachel. Somebody would like to move the receipt of those councillors' reports, please.
She's the key.
Councillor Rodway, seconded. Thank you, Councillor Roy. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Thanks for that, that's very interesting. All right, that takes us to the report section of the meeting. And 9.1 is the retrospective approval of past submissions. Can I just reinforce that welcome Shana, these reports have already been sent, so we can't, these submissions rather, so we can't change them, but if you would like a question for Shana or to reiterate a very important and singular point of yours, then that would be great. Thanks, Shana, it's all yours.
As outlined in the report, we have submitted 4 submissions to the central government and local government recently. And thank you for the contribution to ensuring that submissions reflect our organization's views sufficiently well. And I guess I have briefly explained in the report that they have been lodged during the period in early February. So from 6th to the 13th, they have been submitted at different times. Yes, I can take the report as read and attend to any questions you may have.
Thanks, Shannon. Just to highlight that we are formally approving the offshore renewable energy bill, the draft Sandy Point Domain Reserve Management Plan and Implementation Plan, remembering that these are our submissions. The Resource Management Consenting and Other System Changes Amendment Bill, and the Donovan Park Management Plan. It's got a few there, Rachel.
So through you, Chair, just wanting to highlight that obviously that Resource Management Amendment Bill was a reasonably significant submission, and thank you again for your contribution into that. We have been offered the opportunity to present to the Select Committee on this one as well, so that's coming up in the near future.
Right, we've got Councillor Rodway and then Chairman Horrell, I think. Is that right? Yeah, thanks, Councillor.
Yes, Madam Chair. Well, thank you. I'd just like to comment that I really appreciate the opportunity to make comment on these submissions. It's sort of crossing over a little bit from governance into management, I suppose. But, you know, we do, I think it recognises that councillors have knowledge about these matters and experience and know about, you know, in the case of Sandy Point or Donovan Park in particular, these are places that we know about and visit, and, you know, so I think I really appreciate the opportunity to make a comment on it. And so thank you for making that available.
Thank you, and in such a short time frame in most cases as well. Chairman Horrell.
Yes, I think, you know, we've had a tsunami of submissions sort of coming at us, and the staff do a great job putting things together, but often, as Morris says, we can perhaps come up with an extra point to put into it. So in the perfect world, we'd have more time and be able to go through a meeting, but I think it's important we do actually submit on these things. Interesting on the RMA one, the way things appear to be heading is more tools in the toolbox for the regulator, which we've actually advocated for a long time, that maybe having less influence on the consenting end, which does, I have some concerns that you're having to enforce consent that somebody else has actually had the decision on. There's a wee bit of a disconnect, but we'll watch that going forward. Yeah, I think that's about all. As you see, there's a number of those things that we've had to actually sign off reasonably short notice to actually hit the deadlines. Hopefully going forward we'll have a little bit more time, but when you look further through this agenda at the number of things that are coming at us for comment, it's, the workload is going to be quite high, so well done to the staff of putting things together.
Councillor Wilson.
Well done to the staff. Now, I'm probably a little bit negative on these things because you put ages of effort into this at the cost to Environment South and worked with it. How much effect does it have? You know, could we be doing something else with the time that might reflect back into our local communities?
Through you, Chair, perhaps I could start with a comment or two there. So we do definitely weigh up, I guess, the cost benefit of participating in the process. And one of the things we have as a regional sector done in the last few years has been very proactive in terms of working together to have Tura Kahika put together a submission on behalf of the regional councils at that sort of operational level, and those get seen and contributed to by staff across all the councils. And we believe that's a very efficient way of participating. What we will tend to do is highlight matters of regional significance. I think the fact that we have been called to the select committee on a number of occasions now does mean that our submissions are being given weight and adding value to the process. But certainly it is an assessment that we undertake each single time something comes through with, is there benefit in participating? Does the benefit outweigh the time? So we're very mindful of that.
Thank you.
I have councillor Guyton and then Rodway and then McDonald. Charlotte, did you want to comment on that first? Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add one comment to what Rachel has shared. So from experience, to draft to the NAF submission, our team lead needs to collaborate with internal teams, and what that involves is an analysis of the proposed law and then sharing the content with the other teams within Southland. And what I experienced as one of the greatest benefits of that process is building up that awareness of what's coming for the other teams, so that down the track when the time comes for implementation, what needs to be done can be done more efficiently. Just wanted to add that too.
Thanks, Shane. Councillor Rodway, thanks. Oh, sorry, Councillor Guyton, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just speaking to Councillor Gibson's point about what's the point in submitting. It's very important to submit, particularly if you are submitting in opposition to something, because the number of submissions count, particularly when there's a change of government and they want to undo work that was done badly by the previous government. So it's always worth submitting on those things that you believe in. And to Councillor Horrell, Chairman Horrell's comment about concerns about changes to the RMA and how that might weaken our position, I've sent through an address by Simon Upton to the Blue Greens just over the weekend, I think, which supports what you're saying, your concerns, and he speaks very intelligently to that meeting. So I hope you enjoy the article that I've sent through on that email. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Rodway.
Well, also in response to Councillor Gibson's comments, I know making submissions sometimes can be a little bit frustrating because you feel like you're not achieving anything, but it's an essential part of our democracy. It occurs at our level. We ask for submissions for people and, make comments to our annual plan, and we listen to them, and we might change what we were originally planning to do. And so this is really important, I think, even though you might feel you're not making many changes. It's absolutely essential in our democracy, I believe.
Councillor McDonald. Okay. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you. Yes, I was at the Blue Greens conference. It was an interesting day, and Minister Bishop spoke, and all I would say is the policy that started to roll out, and already some of the farming sector that felt there's no discussion. That's just how it's going to be. There will be no discussion. There will be submissions only. There's going to be a plethora of stuff come at us, and this is probably the only avenue we've got to feed back into government with the amount of work that they're expecting to get signed off in the next 6 months.
Okay. I wonder, Councillor, are you going to write a report?
Yeah, well, I have it on last night.
No, but just speaking as I think, that would be really interesting. Thank you. From a personal level, because obviously you were there personally, right? Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of things from me then. On my notes while I was going through, the regional flavour part was really important, and it speaks to Councillor Gibson's point as well. And given that it's an election, local government body election year, we're expecting people to participate in that process. So I would hope that Councillor Gibson, that people will participate there too, because we want them to participate, speaking to democracy, etc. I'm really pleased to see that resource management submissions, we get an opportunity to speak to the select committee, because I think that's a reflection of the respect that we have. Yes, sorry, Councillor, I'll come to you in a tick in a minute. Again, because of the new way that we did some of the contributions to the submissions, I just want to check with councillors whether you've got a particular point that you made via different avenues to get into the submission, whether you want to raise them here in the public discussion, because some of that, it's maybe not have been obvious. I don't want you to soapbox and, but if there's anything that you particularly exercised about that you submitted to the submissions, now's your chance. So that it's on public record if you feel that there's anybody that's got anything particular that they want to raise. Chairman? Councillor McPhail.
He's probably had his hand up first.
Right.
Oh, no, I was
Just a brief, point.
To give some comments. I would love to see where a government has actually changed their position of all the submissions over the years. You know, what we have submitted on specifically. And this is what we need for Southland. Have we got evidence? I'm just asking, saying where that input has actually influenced, well, Eric might have it. So,
I will let Councillor Roy answer that.
Yeah. The reason you don't actually see that in a government position, because those decisions are made in the select committee that's hearing it, which frequently is not public. So you have to measure the second reading when the report back from the select committee against what the bill is in the first. And there are significant and sometimes minor changes that have occurred through that process. And I think the important thing listening to this debate is that prior to the 1980s, when Geoffrey Palmer changed the way legislation happened by requiring it to go to select committee and opening up the submission process, decisions were made without public input to a large degree. And I think, and I've looked at several legislative systems around the world, that what New Zealand does is probably a world leader. And we don't have an upper house and a lower house, but the status of the select committee is really a lower house that actually does modify and change legislation quite significantly at times. And I could just make also another comment that Robert said, numbers are important. As a person that's read more than 100,000 submissions in an 18-year career, it's not about numbers, it's about substance and quality of what's in the debate. And I have no argument with what we're looking at here in terms of its quality.
Rachel, do you want to say?
Perhaps just to add a recent example, it's not exactly in the context that you're talking about, Councillor, but you'll see that the Resource Management Bill has changes to Section 70 proposed, and clearly we as an organisation at both Councillor to Minister level and at a senior staff to ministry officials level have been talking about Section 70 and issues that have arose through the recent court proceedings for some time. So I believe that the Section 70 amendments are a reflection of some of those conversations.
Thank you. Chairman Horrell, and then Councillor McDonald. Oh, yes, and Councillor Guyton, and then we might be done. Thank you.
Well, just following up on the comments around the room, I think we can make points that do at the end of the day make change. It's one of the reasons ones I had look at then was to do with municipal authorities could basically pick something off the shelf and they'd have an easier path through their consenting process for wastewater. And I did make the comment, how would the farming community feel about that if they saw that the urban people were getting a easier pathway? So I think all those little points, someone's going to read them and pick them up. And having been on one or two of the select committees, the questions around the room, if people are reading and picking up on the information, whether they actually get through to the final thing, you don't know, but I think it's still well worth making the points. And regionally, things are different. I mean, the regional sector now is working very cohesively together, and they can put the bases together, but we can still add regional flavour. I think that's much more efficient than having to do it all.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson, then Councillor Guyton, and then that will be it. Thank you.
No, I didn't, not me.
Oh, sorry, McDonald and Guyton. Sorry.
Yeah, look,
Apologies.
it's a good discussion to have, but we don't have to look any further than what we did in the LTP. We adjusted quite significantly to a deteriorating economy that was happening over a 12-month period. And I'm pretty sure that's the process, the way the process should work. People come in and submit it to us, and we made adjustments. So, yeah, and I also like to think on really important stuff that we would try and take all the opportunities we can to go to Wellington and speak to our submissions, because we've seen here when people come and speak to us, it really does make an impact.
Thank you, councillor Guyton. And
Thank you, just quickly, and I appreciated councillor Roy's commentary about select committees, they're really valuable. Makes me a little bit concerned about the fast track process, slowing down that short circuit, like really concerned. But what I really wanted to ask was, you made reference to a report from Councillor Pemberton about the Blue Green Conference. I wonder if in your report you'd include some material about the GMO, genetically modified organisms proposals that were discussed.
Yeah, that was the example I was using of some people being upset in the community about it not being a discussion, being a.
I look forward to reading that in your report. Thank you.
some homework for you, councillor. Thanks, councillors. If there's no other comments about the retrospective submissions, I'd like somebody to move.
Recommendations.
Thank you, councillor Cox, seconded please. Councillor Gibson, too slow. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, everybody, for interesting conversation. 9.2, the Government Policy and Legislation Monitor, which frightens me every time I read it. Thanks, Shana. Take it away.
So this, the monitor that's attached to the report is the first one this year. And the first few months of 2025 have seen a few significant pieces of legislation, this national policy proposals. I guess again I can take the, if you don't mind, take the focus read and attend to any questions. The previous item on the retrospective approvals have highlighted a few areas where we have made submissions for. Those are the areas where some significant changes are happening currently, and we are expecting a few more changes to come our way, and they have been briefly outlined in the table. Perhaps to add just a few more comments on the major pieces. As we have discussed, we have submitted on the RM Bill number 2. We have heard that the National Direction Package that will bring changes to 20 new and reviewed 21 national policy statements. The timeline has been pushed back slightly, so we are expecting that to land sometime in April. It's only it's not certain yet. It's our expectation. And ahead of that release, we will be seeking to get direction. And we are also expecting some more changes to come in the climate change space in the next month or so. As the government has received a few reports regarding this, so we will be monitoring the changes closely and report back to you as soon as we get them. There are quite a few other major changes, but they have been summarized in the table.
Questions for Shana? Councillor Pemberton and Councillor Cook.
I'll just, I guess, around the powers for a minister to direct council. And I just wonder what the purpose of that is. If my understanding is there's a rule around the hierarchy of rules, so any local council plan, whatever is higher or more stringent is what you operate to. My understanding is that's being reviewed, potentially flipped on its head. Is that correct? Because then I sort of wonder, because then they've got those levers without needing a minister to interfere around giving direction to council. Is that something on our radar?
Sorry, Councillor Pemberton, are you talking about the
Yeah.
Can I perhaps add something to that?
Yeah, sure.
It does appear to be a move to, hasn't gone through, but there's a talk about in the past, you had to meet the national direction, but you could go higher. There is some talk that the ability to go higher may change, but that debate is still to be had.
Because it might just be a lot of this stuff is a lot of admin for just get removed from the discussion if that's what follows. We might.
Councillor Cook.
I just echoed Morrell's comment there. I just see as a general statement that the powers and abilities we have to influence what's going on in Southland seem to be whittled away by all this planned legislation, particularly the forestry one, which did you say we're going to have a workshop on that at some stage? To see, the NES on commercial forestry, I have some dislike for. I think we've been talking about having a Southland strategy for various things, including forestry, and that takes away our ability to do that. So, just my commentary.
Chairman Horrell, do you still want to?
Well, I'll possibly add to that, I've made the comment about having, initiating a national accord with the foresters in South, and I think that's probably still a conversation worth having. There is confusion out there at the moment. I might have to go to government to get them to accept it, but what has come out in early December is reasonably clunky. And I've always believed in Southland Solutions. We've had a good history, I guess, of having worked with the companies in the past, and I think it's probably well worth having that conversation to see where we can take it, because the lack of information out there, I think it is causing a bit of a choke with people not knowing what they can do and what they can't, probably with a little bit of a rush before things, if they had something in place. But we wanted a coordinated response and stuff right there in the right place. And nobody's against trees, it's just about getting the trees in the right place and not on highly productive land. And I think there could be a bit more regional flexibility if we had that conversation. We'd probably have to take it to the minutes if we get approved. But it's worth a conversation worth having.
Thanks, Chairman. Any questions from councillors? I have a question about housing and urban development. Makes me quite actually. One of the points that you made was the new rules that will make it easier for cities to expand outwards at the urban fringe, which relates perhaps to Chairman Horrell's point about highly productive land, because a lot of that highly productive land is right next to cities because the cities have expanded to suit that. So I'm just wondering, what's my question? My question is, how are we going to participate in that housing and urban development discussion? Because it's very relevant to us, and everything from industry to hazards to stormwater to water quality to, So how are we going to participate in that, Shana, as actively as we can, please?
So that section on the national direction, how going for housing content, that has I guess a relatively narrow focus on the changes being introduced under the upcoming national direction and the national direction package. I see that the national policy changes affecting the housing area. The directions are not limited to that package. So for example, the current consultation we have submitted on last weekend relating to wastewater and stormwater, that in the water services bill, that has a significant influence on how urban wastewater will be managed. So there are many different changes that are being brought through different channels. So as we have done, we have consultations because they become available in addition to continuing conversations with the regional sector and the relevant groups, including other councils. Use all the opportunities to offer our insights and knowledge to influence the national policy.
It'll be interesting for councillors to have a discussion about some of that, because cities don't have to expand outwards; they can expand upwards. In some of yes, I think there's the opportunity for councillors to discuss that just as much as we discuss some of the other really important matters that we cover. So I look forward to an opportunity to do that. Councillor Cook, was that you? waving
Yes,
to? Yes.
different topic.
Yes, absolutely.
Just point out the risk, which I see as a risk to council. If you look at page 56, the RMA extended duration of coastal permits. We know we've been through that. We've submitted an opinion on that. The risk there, as with the fast track legislation, is that this council will be required to monitor compliance with those extended permits. Whether we want them or not, they've been extended. So it's just something, it's a workload that's going to be landing on us. Once those approvals, that one's been approved, and the wind farm's another one. They're all going through, and it's going to come back on us to monitor those and make sure compliance is followed.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to fire a question back at you then. So how do you think that will affect what we are going to do? How's that going to affect our workload, and what do you think?
Well, I think it's going to be a much larger workload. The marine ones, we granted those in the first place, so we're aware of those, but maybe one or two that we may not have wanted to renew for that long period of time in the same state. But that's been imposed now.
Councillor Evans, I think.
Yeah, just with your question, Councillor Cook, just would that be an opportunity for our council to ask for more funding from central government regarding reducing costs through actions of central government? Maybe that's something we can look at in the future.
Right. Somebody would like to move that we receive that report then, thanks. Thanks, Councillor Evans, seconded Councillor Gibson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Shana. You know I love that section, but it also frightens me every time I look at it. Thank you. So 9.3, thank you folks, is Freshwater Science Report Package. Welcome Karen and Ewan. Just give us a highlight or two if you need to, thanks. And I am not looking at my video screen, so can everybody see the video screen, see Ewan and Karen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Take it away.
Morning, everyone. So yeah, this item is really to present to you the science package as a whole, as well as the information that's summarised in the catchment summaries. So this package really has been a culmination of about 6 years of work, largely done off the back of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. So there were some substantial changes to that in 2020, which required some reiteration of the work that had been done in combination or along with Te Marama. So the item here lists some of those most key reports that are involved in that package of work. And the bulk of the information, or the key parts of information from those reports, is summarised within the catchment summaries, of which there are 11 of 12 completed so far, the 12th being the WIO, which we are currently working on to complete in the next few months, and that will require a fair bit of collaboration with Meridian. So there are some summaries on table 2, which just provide some, I guess, key points to take in for each of the catchments, and this is within that catchment summary information. I won't try and run through all of those. That is a brief overview of what the item contains.
I will just apologise, the reports are not yet on the website. The person who was going to do that got stuck with flights being cancelled, so that'll happen first thing tomorrow morning.
So they'll be live tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Wonderful.
They are available.
Are you indicating council?
No, I'm
Or are you just
indicating
going,
on the
yeah,
question.
You've got a question? Yeah. Yeah, so I add you to my list. That's what I'm asking. And somebody over here, thank you. Councillor Pemberton, you're first.
Thank you. Thanks for this report. I see some numbers are changing around a little bit, like the nitrogen level in the Terrace drops, but it still comes back to we're measuring what's happening, with modelling what's happening, the people engaged in the community. We need to get these numbers clear my questions around the reference period, I know I bang on about it. Would it be helpful if we put that line in the sand to create certainty within the community to help move these numbers to where they need to go? Additional to that 2017 number, are we going to see this being shifted as another term of like, are we going to see a difference of when the water was recorded for what we're looking for? Is it going to shift from 2017 to more recent times? The reason I ask that, we're working on these numbers, we're asking the community to work forward, we're not being absolutely clear, we're a bit grey in our messaging without not having a reference period. A little bit concerned if we see 2017 change for a different date, different reference period, polluters are protected, those who move forward will not get the support that they probably were looking for by being early adopters. I'm sorry if that sounds a wee bit convoluted, but I'm trying to get some clarity so everybody understands we're running towards a train of poor engagement if we don't address this problem right now. Probably not a science, but I think you can help with those answers.
I think we can just clarify a couple of things. So through you, Madam Chair, I guess we have reported the reductions on the basis of a change from current load. As you know, current sort of takes us a good 5 years of data in order to establish what current means, which is why we don't sort of update it every year because it just doesn't change that quickly. So that is one way, and that's been the main way that we've done the reporting. The second way is we do have the absolute kind of tonnes as well. We tended to not report on that because preference to not focus in on the absolute numbers in favour of the reductions, because I felt that was kind of more meaningful for people and a bit more commensurate with the scale of uncertainty around the calculations.
So being there with five-year reviews, we're now 7 years from just over 7 years. Are we going to see another getting in the sand, and then the conversation we're having for the last 5 years becomes a bit mute? That's my concern around when we're getting what's talking.
So we can do that, but the loads don't sort of change that dramatically. Like land use hasn't changed that dramatically.
Behaviours have.
Behaviours have.
That's
but we're not seeing it in terms of the trends, and our state assessment hasn't changed.
Anyway, because some are pulling back and some are heading. So it's quite a social thing we need to get addressed pretty soon.
Perhaps if I can just follow up in terms of the policy aspects around this. You will recall the September strategy and policy direction to address this matter through the plan change that's proposed for this year. We don't have an item on the 2025 plan change today. We've got sessions to be had next month with Te Marama, who are a partner obviously in the freshwater space, but we expect to have a discussion back for the April meeting.
So I'll keep pushing till we see something. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to chuck in there because I can, because I'm the chair. It'd be really helpful if we had a definition and a clear understanding of what the reference period means, because I've just had a discussion with a number of you, and there are different understandings. So at some point, I think we probably need to have that discussion as well and be clear about what our understanding of reference period actually is. Anyway, Councillor McDonald, you are next, and then Councillor Gibson, Evans, McPhail and Rodway. Thank you.
Very much. Table 2 makes pretty sobering reading, doesn't it really? You can look through that, not great, but that hasn't changed. I think even though we don't have a plan change, or doesn't seem to be a plan change coming anytime soon in this term, we need to get out to the community with these reporting catchments that are particular to the own catchment, talking about this stuff again, because it's sort of gone away in the last 6 months. We've had other things, people have been consumed with other things. We just need to remind people and just take this, like I suggest that we've got a window coming up in March, April especially. Why don't we cluster 3 or 4 catchment groups together one evening and do that all around the region, take these catchment these catchment science summaries out to them. And we don't have to have all answers, just to remind them where we are. We still sit there and get some feedback on that, and it's nothing less, it's a great way to reconnect with their communities. Because we've been in this state of flux, wondering, well, what's Wellington going to do? What are they going to do up there? We better not do anything down here till they do anything. But we've got an opportunity to do something there.
So through you, Chair, Sam obviously spoke last week about the action on the ground work stream, and one part of that work stream is the socialisation of the catchment science, and there are some quite specific actions planned, which we can bring more detail back to you.
Yeah, well, let's not miss that window, that's all I'm saying. It closes pretty quick once you get past through into April, doesn't it? So there we go, it's an opportunity.
Thanks, Councillor. Can I just remind councillors that we've got 2 water experts in the room, so let's maximise the opportunity to ask them those questions. Thank you, councillor.
Could you enlighten me? I know that Mr. Rodway is in our science team, but I looked down table 1. How many authors are within our science team? Environment Southlands one.
Through you, Madam Chair, there is a good number that are in the team or were in the team that have subsequently left.
Who are they?
So the first report in table 1 was done by consultants.
The consultants outside.
Yeah, as was the second report. The third report, which was a joint piece of work with Meridian Energy, was done by NIWA. The fourth report was done internally by ES staff.
So Blackmore, all those other ones there are all staff members.
Employed by Environment Southland, or were employed by Environment Southland. Right. As the next one, the quality report is a combination of an ES staff member and a consultant. And
only one EE is a staff member.
And then the very last one is an ES staff member.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, through you, Chair, to science officers. Mine is in relation to page 75. The report on the river environment classification classes for the Lower Waiau River. Over the years I've been involved in council, and beforehand I've been asking the question of Meridian and at other groups as well about the feed and what percentage comes from river over lake for the Lower Waiau. And personally have a lack of, or I have a concern around the independence of work being commissioned when the person or the organisation or the business that's involved in the issue is also involved in partly funding commissioned work. So do we have the ability do you guys have the ability to look at that river classification that was done based on times during the year, or is it just a whole 12-month period that they say that the Lower Waiau stem is lake feed, or as a percentage, or do we have a breakdown month by month? Because there does seem to be times during the year, quite extensive times during the year, where it's river feed from the Mararoa over top of lake feed, and I believe the percentage over the year would probably be more lake feed because of high flow events in winter, but during a majority of the year the flow comes from the river. And I see you both nodding, and I hope you're getting where I'm coming from with my question, but I personally don't see a lack of there's a lack of independence within this work commission when the group, business, or whoever is involved is the reason for this question being asked, or this work being commissioned.
Councillor, we'll let them answer your question. Do you want
Yes,
yeah,
please,
thank
yes.
you.
So through you, Madam Chair, so yes, this work was jointly funded. It was undertaken by the CRI, Crown Research Institute, which should be NIWA. Before we commissioned this work, we actually did do some work internally to have a look ourselves. And so this was pretty consistent with our own work we had done as well. I think though, just to clarify, what the river environment classification does is it doesn't actually look at where the source of flow is at any given time. What it does is it looks at kind of what the characteristics are. So it's sort of almost like a personality test of what the river is. And so then we then link our water quality standards in accordance with the natural characteristic. So it's essentially saying that in actual fact, this report wasn't a favourable outcome for Meridian in terms of its assessment, as it showed that the majority of the Lower Whale River had those characteristics of the lake-fed stream, which means higher natural water quality. Hence it was classified as being lake-fed for the majority of the reach.
Thank you for that, Chair. Just one follow-up. So another question would be, the point of this work is because of the water take before the Lower Whale, which is from the organisation that is co-funding the or co-commissioning this works.
So this particular issue did actually come up through the proposed site, and we're in land plan hearings, and the reason it's important is because the targets or the desired state depends on the natural characteristics of the system, and we do that in order to make sure that we're not sort of asking for a desired state that is beyond what is reasonable for that system type. So the system type is lake-fed, and as I said, that tends to be a bit higher in terms of the desired target attribute states than, say, a lowland river or stream.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Councillor McPhail, question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for in regards to reference periods, because there is a high variation of understanding there. After I support it, but actually know what get everybody on the same page there. I've just a couple of questions in regards to you made a point, Karen, in regards to percentages versus tonnages or volumes. I work on the other. I like coming from a practical side of things. Percentages of what? Okay, you tell me 4 million tonnes or whatever it is. You can understand total tonnes of nitrate. It's actually quite relevant to maybe the people that you're talking about reductions to, and they can get their heads around, and also they can sort of bring it back to their own land holdings or whatever, if we can get that. So it's actually, when science side of things, percentage might be good, but from the community it could be actually the tonnages maybe, or volumes or things like that. I'm just making that suggestion. I always look at the E. coli debate. We're talking about wetlands and the influence of wildfowl on it is there. In regards to this, I do think we're going to shoot ourselves on the foot. We're going to have 10,000 wetlands out there, which will only increase the habitats for wildfowl and things like that. And I know this year it's exceptionally the ducks, the damage they're doing within farms operations. I know personally that decimated crops, but because the numbers are so high and a wetter summer, not disagreeing with the E. coli number, but it's actually understanding that E. coli number, and if we're just to, and we know we've got DNA reports understanding how it influences that number too. So I know I've always gone on about this, but it is relevant when we're going to say build all these wetlands. We must have, we have to do wetlands, we have to do protect them, but it could be consequences to data too, that in the future, that if we get rampant wildlife, that will have an effect on water quality too. So that's all I'm just making a point out. One thing and the other thing, I have looked through the Mataura summaries, and we've still got, you know, I've challenged some of the way that the indexes on the the maps, I still don't think we've got it right there, but I know I've pointed that out on the big yellow one, is the nitrates, total nitrates. I still think we're missing the mark and explaining it better. My point of view, again, from the ground, you're going to be communicating this to people in those areas. I still think we're missing that. So, and I'm happy to discuss that, reiterate that again, if possible.
Did you have a question, councillor?
Yeah. Can I talk to you? Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, councillor Rodway.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Just going back to councillor Pemberton's question about this reference data, I must confess that I don't really understand. I have talked to you about it, John. I thought I understood it then, but I must have forgotten how it's so important to the farming community. Looking at this here, let's take the Reti, for example. We've got a reduced nitrogen load by 86% to reach the state of Florida. It seems to me that we shouldn't be thinking about a reference point, but we should be thinking about specific actions that can be taken in places where that load is, where those discharges, whether point source discharges or non-point source discharges, are contributing to that load, and how we can change those practices to reduce that load. So I don't see how a reference period is useful in that now. I think we should be saying to people, right, we've got to reduce the load by a whole lot. What are all the things we can do on what you do to help reduce that? Does that not make sense?
I'll just reply quickly, shortly.
Yeah, really quickly, because I'd
Yeah,
like to give
okay.
Rachel an opportunity too.
I think once we understand there's only 15%, around 15% in the Tara's dairying, we remove all of that, we're not going to get anywhere near the amounts. Now, where we're going to go to chase targets for a start. So once we understand that that's an all of catchment approach for a start, when we get to the really tough numbers, then we start bringing in individual operations. But as a whole, we have to move together as a community. How we do that, I can discuss you later.
Yeah, and it's,
Could I go back to the
Yep.
staff and ask them how can we achieve even a small reduction? Like as John says, even if we get rid of all the dairy, and we're still going to have a long way to go. So how can we achieve those reductions or anything like that?
So there are, through the scenario modelling, there are sort of quite a few options laid out there of the different things that we've tested and the magnitude of reductions that those achieve. So that's a good place to start, to have a look at what kind of things can achieve what kind of reductions. Whilst dairy in Matilda is a relatively small proportion of land use, it does still make up a relatively large proportion of the nitrogen loss, including winter grazing. So whilst it's a small area, reductions can still result in relatively large decreases in load within the catchment. I guess what we have shown through that scenario modelling, though, is that none of those scenarios would achieve those reductions for the Matilda. So that is where that conversation about bigger picture and longer term changes needs to come to the fore.
thank you, councillor, for your good question. Chairman Horrell, a question from you, please.
I'm sure I can fit a question in there somewhere.
I'm sure you
Look,
can.
this is really good. The science is, I'm assuming it'll go out now, and as soon as we can get our website up so we can start having the conversations. I mean, we've got 37 catchment groups out there. Science, very good science on 12 sub-catchments. This is going to be very useful for these communities who actually want to be working together and individually to improve the quality. And I think there's been a bit of debate about the year 2017. I think as a baseline for science, that's really good. That some of the other conversation about reference periods is actually wider. And in some discussions for fairness, you might want that over several years. But to baseline information, I think that's really good. And I think, because our state of the environment science is a wee bit clunky in a period of time, I believe, we see the word hold the line wasn't that popular at one stage. I believe we are holding the line and improving, and having a baseline is actually really good going forward to see that. Yes, we've got down here. I have some sympathy for Paul's, the lake fed classification of the YL because, and that means it's a higher bar. It is a conversation that probably needs to be had at some stage. I mean, this is the most modified catchment in New Zealand. I think the two tail races are about the third highest flow compared with rivers in New Zealand. So it is significant. And while we want to improve water quality, at some stage we probably need to ask the question: is the lake fled, the lake classification the right one for that particular river? I can leave it there. So the only question is, when will this be live on the website?
Thank you, Chairman. The answer would be tomorrow.
Perhaps just
Yes, thank you,
really
Rachel.
quickly. So I think it's already been alluded to. The key things around this freshwater science package are the fact that they're out there, they're available, and they provide, as Ewan alluded to, in terms of the catchment science summaries, information on the actions people can take to take us closer to where we need to, and those are refined at those reporting catchment scales, so that you know, if I'm in this area, these are the actions that are going to have the biggest bang for buck. In terms of the discussions around, you know, what is the reference periods, they flow into both Plan Change 2025, which we'll be discussing in the next few weeks, and the later Plan Change 2027, which is the limit setting plan change, which has been pushed out to respond to government direction coming. So there will be further opportunity for these discussions, but we've got a package of information that's out there to inform community action now.
Thanks, Rachel. I've got two more questions, something from Councillor McDonald and Councillor Rodway's getting a second crack at it. And then me. So Councillor McDonald, thank
Yeah,
you.
just, I've got a question at the end of the
Start with the question, go on.
I think the body of work and the scientific work regarding fresh water from within the building and outside the building has considerable momentum, and it has for some time. Has shown a clear direction with its peer support work and all that feeding into that too. So I've got no doubts around that. I've just got a wee general caution for this council sitting here, and it hasn't happened today, and I understand the councillor's prerogative. We sit here and we have to question and test. We have to test this body of work and answer these questions. But we've got to be really careful we don't go over that line and start to cast doubt. And that is really an easy thing to do. So I've been here when that's been happening. Morris wanted to know how we change these numbers or we start heading in a different direction. We certainly don't change or start heading in a different direction by casting doubt. So it's just a wee warning. It hasn't happened today, but I've been in this room when we've casted doubt on the amount of wetland loss in this province a number of years ago. And look where we are today. So it's just a wee caution to this council anyway. Question, yeah, I can come up with something.
No, it's all right.
When's lunch?
I'll allow your statement at this time, Councillor Rodway, thanks.
My question relates to the wire and the discussion we had earlier about whether it is or isn't a lake-fed river. I think Karen explained it quite well, but my understanding is that it is a lake-fed river, even in its modified state, because if you look at the flow at the moment, which has been occurring for some time, the Mararoa flow today is 5.25 cubics, and the flow at the weir is 17.27 cubics. So there's 12 cubics coming from the lake at the moment. And then if you go down the river, you find the biggest inflow. Then at Sunnyside, the flow is currently 40 cubics, and that's largely because of the outflow of Lake Monowai, which is a lake, obviously. So even though it's been highly modified, it's still, I think you can justify saying that it is a lake outlet river, and therefore it has a higher bar to meet.
Thank you.
That's not a question either, sorry, but I'm just really,
Sorry.
It's still valuable discussion, otherwise I'd have shut it all down, but we also have some technical experts and we really need to make the most of their direct access, so Councillor Evans, I'll push myself after
Sorry,
your question.
I do apologise, just in reply, part of my question was around breaking the figures down, not just looking at one day, because Councillor Rodway has pinpointed from the river gauges now, but I've also seen times, and I'm sure Councillor Rodway has, where the flow from the Mararoa is equal to the flow into the Waiau, or more. So, and that was part of the question. So I just need to, part of the question was it a report that showed the breakdown historically over the whole year, or was it just an overall saying, yeah, there's 51% supplied by lake? You know, that was my concern. So part of the question was not just looking at today, looking at every day. Thank you.
So through you, Madam Chair, I'm pretty sure that that report is already on the website, so I will submit the link for that.
Thank
but
you.
it does look at it looks at source of flow in a broad sense. It looks at things like water temperature and clarity and some of those things. So what kind of characteristics does that water hold, as opposed to, I guess, looking at kind of more like the water molecules and where they come from. So it doesn't get into that level of detail, but yeah, that report make sure it is circulated.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Two questions from me, I hope. First one relates to the Blakemore report on page 75, the last one. I'm just not sure what that actually means, that key message.
Through you, Madam Chair, within the current NPSFM, there's a requirement for us to look at, so currently the modelling around nutrients looks at a couple of different attributes,
Yep.
looks at like purified and et cetera.
Yep.
There's a requirement in the NPSFM for us to look at other attributes that maybe don't have that level of information behind them, but we still have to consider the effect on those attributes. So that's what this memo does, is it looks at macroinvertebrates and some of the other indicators that are not included in the modelling, and looks at whether or not the reductions are
So subsequent to that then, the last paragraph, the last sentence says it concludes that by managing for purified and phytoplankton as determined by the numeric modelling, other nutrient dependent attributes will be provided for.
So what I was saying is, if you achieve those load reductions for purified and phytoplankton, etc., you're also going to be managing for the other attributes that are not explicitly modelled.
Right, so one will improve the other, essentially.
Yeah, so basically,
Hopefully.
purified and etc. is the conservative thing to aim for. By achieving their requirements, you'll achieve
Right,
the other
yes,
attributes.
understood. Yep, thank you. And the other thing relates to Councillor McPhail's statement about something that I can't remember now. But it made me think, what is our ongoing monitoring program now? Because we've got this fantastic work. What's the ongoing measurement reporting as we see all the marvellous changes that we're expecting? I'm sure it's about this big, so just confirm for us that there's actually a program going forward and how we might see it.
Through you, Chair. So our monitoring program at the moment exists very much as it has for the recent past. We are undergoing a full review of that program this next financial year, and that is really with the aim of exactly what you're talking about, figuring out exactly what we need to be monitoring and how to be able to not only understand the state and changes in our environment, but also tracking the implementation of plans and action on the ground. So yes, that's being considered.
The plan is to come back to council probably mid-year, later year, pre-election, with how that's shaping up. And the intent is to come up with a couple of different options of where the science program might go and what level of investment might be required to get us there. so that this council can then inform the future direction of the science monitoring program.
Excellent. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to understand. In that case, if there are no more questions, would somebody like to move the
Happy to move,
receipt of
Madam
the
Chair.
report? Thank you, Chairman Horrell, seconded by me. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, team. That takes us to 9.4. The update on the proposed Water and Land Plan appeals. Welcome, Liz.
This is just an update report, and we have more information at this stage. There may be limits in terms of what questions I may be able to answer, given that most of this is still before the court, so I will be able to attempt to answer what I can. However, as you'll be aware, there are still matters on the proposed water and land plan that are live in the courts in various stages. And these relate to weed sediment removal, water quantity, and incidental discharge. I'll just take the report as read, and I'm happy for you to ask any questions.
Thanks, Liz. Can I just say before I take Councillor McDonald's question that that was really well explained. Some of that I've heard lots of times, but actually that was worded your report really well, I think, in my view. Anyway, helped me anyway, thank you. Councillor McDonald and then Councillor Peopleton.
Any live updates will see in the
We met with the working group again last week. At that meeting, we discussed sort of a package of solutions towards the issue around weed and sediment removal, looking not just at what we can do within the plan, but also within the wider operations programs. So we need to report back to court. I think it's this week. There's a teleconference with all the working parties just to update in terms of progress and whether there's a need to go back to the Environment Court. We're working really hard to keep it out of the court and see what resolutions we can have. Given that the appeal was raised by appeal to High Court, was raised by Fish and Game and Forest and Bird. They're the two parties that we really need to work quite closely with, as well as our partners along the way. So we'll continue to do that. As I said, there's a wide range of parties involved in this and representing a wide range of views. So trying to make it not covering all of the issues, but also not making it too overly complex for everyone involved is the real challenge that we've got. So that's all I can really say.
Councillor Peopleton.
Thank you. Not a long question. If we had certified farm plans in place when our water and land plan had said we would have had them, would Section 70 have been in a rather academic conversation now?
Probably not. There's some procedural processes that were within the appeal to get us to the rule that we have in the plan at the moment. It may be a solution, but not necessarily the whole solution, given that farm plans may not cover all the activities that end up in discharges to the waterways. So
Could have been used.
it definitely is a useful tool, and I believe the direction that we're seeking through submissions in the to the central government, then wait to the use of farm plans in these processes. And so we just await. What we're doing is we're waiting to see what happens with Section 70. We're really keen to see how that plays out, because as the submission is all around moving towards improvements and reducing the impact on aquatic wildlife. It's definitely a tool that we're using our submission to support that case.
Chairman Horrell and then Councillor Rodway.
Yes, Madam Chair. The Section 70, and I'm assuming we have a stay in place because the government have indicated that they will change something that hasn't actually happened yet. But in regard to the last question, this really was specifically about having to have a reverse consent to farm for incidental discharges. So while the farm plan which would take for some things I guess that was our big concern was if you told everybody you've got to have a farm plan, you've got to have resource consent as well, that really doesn't seem to get on with it. The other question I had was over the Wilkins consent on the tower. I guess two questions. One is, are we very close to having that allocation sorted? And I'm assuming this is the outstanding consent that lapsed some years ago that all preferences were wanting to bring to the floor.
So just for a point of clarification on Rule 24, just to start with, we actually don't have a stay approved yet. We're in the process of working with the parties with an appearance before the court to get that stay approved. There's some parties that support us and some neutral and some that have opposed that stay, so we're still working on that in the court process. In terms of the water quantity appeal, so my understanding of consent appeal is that it's gone back to the court and we're waiting a consent order from the court in that process to resolve the consent side. Once that consent has been resolved, then we'll be able to go back and have a look at the plan and make sure that see whether the appellant believes that that consent has resolved the issues that they've raised through the plan appeal. So just because the consent appeal is resolved, they may still want to pursue further changes to their plans. We're awaiting that, but until the consent appeal has been resolved, it's still an element of uncertainty.
We would still have to be within the allocations that's available, sort of thing. So we're ongoing conversations with the whole catchment, and this outstanding one would still have to fall within the total allocation for the catchment.
As I said, it's still, the whole appendix is still.
Councillor Rodway was the last one.
Use that Councillor Pemberton brings up a really interesting point, and something that doesn't mean also that is why we couldn't have arranged it so that the farm plan was a resource consent as well, so that we didn't need to go through all this process. I imagine it's cost a fortune with all the appeals to the various courts. So I don't know if we probably have talked about all this, and I think you sort of explained it before, in my understanding, but that does seem to me to be an alternative approach that we could have taken. I do have a second question, but is that true or not true? It's probably too late now because we've done it this other way. But
there are things to be learned though, potentially, Councillor, aren't there? So,
sorry?
There are things to be learned. So, Liz, are you able to answer that, or?
I probably can't answer it because I wasn't involved in the case earlier and proposals, but I think in terms of the future, I think farm plans may be a way of helping address and ensuring we get improvements in the right direction.
From a legal point of view, we couldn't issue, farmers couldn't to the courts, farmers couldn't discharge, couldn't allow a discharge as a permitted activity. And if we'd had that in the farm plan to say, okay, you've got this farm plan, so that also means that you have a consent to carry on your activities which do result in a discharge. You don't really control the issue. I guess you have thought about that, but I never really heard it explained that well. As long as not here at the moment, you might have really.
You could just note that once things get into a court process, you're confined obviously by the scope of the original submissions and further submissions, but then by the scope of the appeals. So sometimes some of the thinking that would be good to bring into the process isn't always available, but actually Rural 78 is a good example where through the negotiations process, the whole suite of tools is being considered as well as the rules.
So the other question, Madam Chair, is in relation to the weed and sediment removal. And I bring this up because coming in here today, I drive along a Bay Road, and when I go into town from Otara every day, I see the drains that are part of the Lake Hawkins drainage network. And recently, over the past few weeks, these have been dug out, and all the sediment and weeds was lying on the bank. And no doubt, with those piles of sediment and weeds, there have been quite a few galaxids and other tamarine species dumped on the pasture that we have just built a massive pump station with a fancy fish-friendly pump to allow those fish to go backwards and forwards from the sea. So it seems to me that there is a need for some improvement in the way that weed and sediment is removed from drains, because they do provide good habitat for these native species, much more so than trout. Because trout like a bigger river with these little weed-filled drains are very important habitats for eels and galaxids and whitebait galaxids. So having a better, more sensitive way of removing that sediment and weed where there is an important native fish habitat should be something that we are doing and encouraging.
And through you, that is part of the conversation that we're having in the working group. So as I said, we're talking beyond just the rule. It's looking at operational matters as well. So code of practice, guidelines in terms of best practice methods and the habitats of galaxids are definitely one of the matters that that is being discussed in a lot of detail with the working groups.
But I know drainage maintenance is important from a point of view, but it seems to me that I think this is the basis of the Fish and Game appeal. That there needs to be a better way of doing this to have regard for those other values.
I guess the question is how we build that thinking into our policies and plans in the future, so that we are being proactive and allowing the right things. How we build it into our strategy and policy in the trick. I don't have anybody else on my list. Would somebody like to move the receipt of that? Thank you, Councillor Pemberton. Seconded, Councillor Cook. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Liz. 9.5, we're not bad for time, folks, so well done everybody so far. 9.5 is climate change and community resilience update. Anka's been waiting patiently at the back. So we will receive the report and provide feedback on the content of Appendix 1, which might be interesting. Sharing screens here, is it?
So through you, Chair, we have a short presentation, so we're just getting the technology up and running.
Thank you. It's not letting me follow.
He probably was. Your father's sleeping.
Yep.
Sleep mode.
Your own system.
It will be.
That's pretty awesome.
just need to through now, Rachel.
You can join the meeting from your laptop phone. You can join the meeting.
Kia ora koutou. I do have a brief presentation today, which hopefully Rich will come back to load in just a moment. But essentially the key purpose of the presentation today is to step through the report provided as part of the agenda and in particular the appendix to that report. Just coming up. Looks. Right, perfect. Okay, so you might as well skip to the next slide straight away, Rach. The first two key components of the regional framework for action are really about connecting it back to the regional climate change strategy that was adopted near the end of last year and endorsed by Te Ao Marama, and making sure that there's that carry through from the strategy document into the regional framework for action. So you'll be very familiar with the principles illustration, and on the next slide is a illustration of the aspirations. Now in the regional climate change strategy, these were across multiple pages, and so on this slide they've been pulled together into one illustration. But essentially those are the two key components from the strategy that are foundational to the regional framework, proposed draft regional framework for action. Go to the next slide. Yep. So when discussing the shape of the regional framework for action, the Regional Climate Change Working Group is really keen to make sure that the work that they've been doing in the past year on phase 2 with all the workshops to date was pulled into a document, like in the timeline being the coming 6 months. So that was quite key in terms of defining and refining what was set out in the strategy and how to make that work in practice as an actual product for what the regional framework for action would look like. So on this slide are the key aspects of the purpose of the regional framework for action that they've landed on. That this regional framework for action will need to identify agreed outcomes and key focus areas for action, the action being particularly important. Making sure that there's visibility of existing near-term actions, and this was something, there's a whole lot of work from a whole lot of agencies in this space, but there's not necessarily visibility in one place, and so trying to pull this together in one place is quite a key step to this work. That the regional framework for action will reflect the collaborative nature of action required. So each agency involved is, again, like I said, doing lots of good stuff in this space, but there's a need to try and make sure that we can capture what planned actions would benefit from being progressed in the collaborative space. And providing some indication on the level of priority of actions and role clarity. Now, role clarity is a big one, a big component, because that's quite key in terms of making sure that we're efficient across our agencies as well. So there's lots of great ideas coming through, but I guess on that purpose slide, still one more point is that while that's important, the rubber hits the road when you start talking about the nitty-gritty of how that will actually arrive in a product. So the first key component at the front end is the draft regional component outcomes. So these are about describing meaningful changes, linking short-term actions with the long-term aspirations of the regional climate change strategy. And this is going to be particularly important when it comes to monitoring and measuring progress, and making sure that we can inform future iterations of any regional framework for action going forward. So over on the right-hand side of that slide is what was envisaged as part of the regional climate change strategy. And the two halves of the conversation underneath the principle, the two halves of the conversation there being the adaptation side of the conversation and the mitigation side of the conversation. And then the box below being the fact that there's a whole bunch of individual agency work and each agency needs to do their own action planning, but that the regional framework for action is about pulling that together in terms of that collaborative space. So the outcomes there on the left is really been, they've been holding outcomes at the moment, and they will remain holding outcomes in the near future as we go through this process and a bit further. But essentially they're about landing that gap between the aspirations being long-term in the strategy and what we need to do in terms of action on the ground. It's like that connecting layer. And so on the next slide here, this just explains those regional outcomes in a bit more detail. This is also outlined in the appendix as well. Combined, this is all the front-end components, the key components for the regional framework for action, and then the rubber really starts hitting the road when we move into the next slide, which is about the proposed focus areas for action. Now, the top box there, regional climate leadership. The reason this is a focus area is it's about what local government needs to do to really evolve within the leadership space when talking about our changing climate. The box on the left-hand side, the understanding climate change, climate science and risk, really captures the fact that we have a huge amount of information needs still, and that's reflective in the adaptation information pathway that you're all familiar with, which was going to be angled towards that in particular, but actually we are also on an information collecting pathway when it comes to reduction of emissions as well. So that's where it's being pulled out as a key focus area that relates to both. The blue and the orange boxes, they are reflective of the regional climate change, two halves for the conversation, and the fact that we need to carry on that conversation, and what does that mean in terms of action on the ground. And then underneath the implementation, monitoring and evaluation, that's about ensuring that all of these become foundational components to informing future iterations of the regional framework for action. So again, further detail of this is in the appendix as well. Next slide. And so moving forward, when the concept of the regional framework for action started to take much more shape in the regional climate change working group discussions, what started landing was the need for additional phase, as in phase 3. So far the regional climate change strategy has only talked about phase 1 and phase 2. But one thing that's really worked from the discussions to date is tying this work stream into the LTP cycles, because when you're talking about action in the ground, the nitty-gritty really comes down to how will that action be resourced. And while we've had a little bit of a unusual cycle in terms of the LTPs not being all aligned across our local government agencies over the last couple of years, generally speaking, these are aligned, and going forward, the expectation is that these will line up once again. And so that is the most natural sort of place to start talking about that resourcing conversation across all the partner agencies in terms of that timing. So moving forward, thinking that the regional, go back a slide. Moving forward, we've got phase 1 sorted, that's the strategy, that's that first picture. The second picture is what we're working on at the moment, which we're thinking the Regional Climate Change Working Group is thinking will be a high-level document that just gets us through this next bit to get the ball rolling. And then phase 3 will start taking shape as 10-year action plans going forward, and that those will tie in with the LTP cycle. So that's what's proposed at the moment in terms of making this work in terms of the longevity of this work stream. The next slide. So the proposed timeline, this is how the Regional Climate Change Working Group is hoping that it all come together. There's still a couple of key workshops to go before mid-year. We're currently undertaking quite a bit of communications and engagement type work at the moment. So there's lots going on. It's a bit of a crunchy part of the process at the moment. The communications and engagement aspect is quite high priority at the moment, and that's where we've had a presence at AMP shows recently, and on Wednesday will be at SIT Orientation Week, and there's a few other things that are going on. And the blue box there is about the fact that each agency that's involved is having these kinds of conversation with their council at the moment. So each agency is doing that in their own way. So obviously I'm here today at Strategy and Policy Committee. SDC are going to be having a council workshop early next week. ICC are presenting an item to their, I can't remember the name of the committee now, not the full council, but it's their community version, Community and Wellbeing Committee, I think it is called. GDC on the 18th of March is again an item to the council, and hopefully the Te Ao Marama board will also be towards the end of March as well. Hoping to bring all of that communications and engagement feedback, as well as the feedback that we receive via each agency, together for nutting this through at the 10th of April Regional Climate Change Working Group Workshop. So the last slide, Rachel, that's just basically been about presenting a high-level overview of where the Regional Climate Change Working Group is at. I know Councillor Morrison isn't here today, so Councillor Broadway's been quite involved, whether he's got anything in particular to add to it. But essentially quite keen to hear back from everyone today about what your thoughts are on what has been drafted so far. How does the shape and look and feel come across, the key components? Are they sort of landing in the right place? Do you have any further considerations that you think need to make sure aren't forgotten? So really keen to just pass it back over for a discussion.
Thanks, okay. We have Councillor Gardner and Councillor Cook to begin with.
Thanks, very, very comprehensive. It's come a long way, I think, since. I've got a bit of not a niggle, but a question about your receptivity to the expressed views of the community. And I see that you're collecting views at the AMP shows, and I would have thought they might be somewhat weighted in a particular direct farming community in particular. And I wonder what the summation of those views is, and how are you countering capture? That's if I was Groundswell, I'd be going to those AMP shows, going to your stall and saying what I thought. Once they were inclined. But I note that you're going to be talking at the SIT, so that's something, some connection with the town. But how are you relating what you hear on the ground, so to speak, with our actions? How responsive do we have to be to our community? The reason why I say that is because Southland and Otago and Canterbury, etc., are different, and the effects of climate change are different in different areas. And I think NIWA's predictions from several years ago pretty good. We get more rain, more heat, whereas other parts might not be, but also close to colder areas. And so it will be quite easy for some sun of the soil or whatever to get a feeling and make an assessment based on actual experience, which can't really be relied on in the bigger picture, given that we've got scientists. It's a complicated question, I think. But you see what I mean? What I'm trying to say is, how much weight do you give to that, and what precautions do you take that we're not going to be playing?
So I think at this stage in the process, it's a little bit still about trust the journey. It's too early days to provide a summation of the communications and engagement direction that we've got so far. I do know that so far in terms of AMP shows, most of the attendance has been rural in terms of Winton, Gore, Waiau, whereas this coming weekend is the Invercargill one, for example, which tends to be a different audience. But also the hope is that we'll also do a couple of pop-up type stalls in the city centre. That's still to be confirmed, to make sure that that urban audience is engaged with as well. But yeah, it's a really good question in terms of how to make sure that makes a difference. It's a really, so far in terms of my experience at the AMP show that I attended, which was the Gore one, it was a really good opportunity to get a bit of a feel for that perception. So while there is a whole lot of scientific information that's developing, it's still really important to have a really good understanding of where people are at with things. So yeah, one of the opening questions was around, what changes have you noticed in the past in terms of the climate, and that was quite an interesting opening question to have, and people were noticing quite a few changes. And so even that information and how that comes together, it's too early to tell, but I'm hoping that will make a difference.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cook.
Yeah, just a statement, then a question. Listening to Ruth Kleingras's program on the radio on a Sunday morning, the majority of the callers, and I have been sort of taking note of this, have been mentioning the changes in flowering plants, insects, animals. We're seeing all sorts of exotic fish being caught in the Favo Strait now, which we're not sort of used to. So climate change is out there, and it's been mentioned across the board, not by any focus group, but gardeners particularly are noticing the changes. I realise we have to lay the foundations if we're going to work together on this, and we have to have plans and organise ourselves, but I'm just wondering when those will come to a point of action when we're actually doing something about climate change adaptation in a practical way. I just made a whole lot of notes, so that all amounts to just that. So when are we going to see something actually happening? I know we've got to organise, and I think you've done a really good job with that. But is that delaying actually doing something?
So I guess the regional framework for action is about organising for that action. But part of the need to get something, even if it's not perfect, across the line in the coming months is because of the urgency of making sure that we can have some action happening. But that it is going to be a long-term journey, really. So the idea of that phase 3, where that becomes a longer-term part of our work going forward, and that 10-year planning that will feed into ongoing LTP plans. The idea is that as those actions come to fruition, that there'll be a place for them, and we can find a way forward to make them happen.
Can I just perhaps add to that,
Susan?
Chair? My observations as an amateur is that climate change is accelerating right around the world. We're saying we've got a 10-year plan, and 10 years the whole world's going to look quite different to what it is now. I don't know that we've actually got time to have any delays. We need to move on. I'm not quite sure how we would move on, but
Thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Rodway and then me, thanks.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's been, this days, it has been something that's at the top of the mind, I think, of people on the group, from all the councils. Tom Campbell's mentioned this as well a couple of times. But, it really is important to get everybody on board and to everybody thinking along the same lines. All the councils, and there's quite a diversity of views among the councillors through the whole region. Well, it's a question about, getting input from the public. We did a survey last year, was the year before that, and councillors were surveyed, and all the councillors of all the councils were surveyed. There was 60 or 70%, I think, were, saw the need to take action. But the action that we can take really is a little bit limited. We can, the stuff we're doing that we saw today about Mataura, for example, that is climate action in action. We are telling people that, if there's a big flood, then there's a whole lot of people's properties going to be in danger. That is part of our work, I think. So it is happening, but it's really important to get everybody on board. We can, as Phil says, you can go, if you go fast, you can't get very far, but if you go with everybody together, then you can get there in the end. It's a little bit frustrating, but as you said, Robert, it's a very thorough process, and maybe some people are a little bit frustrated by the thoroughness of it, but I think at the end of the day, it will be important to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McDonald, I'll let you sneak in before me because
Yeah, just a general
Robert
comment.
to go
of course.
last.
I just want to react to what Neville said. How do we do it? First of all, we do it. This is a question around physics and science. It's not a political question. It's that simple. Most people think it's intertwined in politics and beliefs. Science doesn't care what you believe in. That's the reality. And we've had these discussions around the table. They go round and round. It comes down to there, basically. So it's leadership from the top saying this is one of physics and science. This is how it is. Just like at freshwater, just like all the other things we tackle. You're no different. But somehow climate in people's minds seems to be different. It's a belief. It's not. So, see it clearly.
Thank you. Right, me, I've got a couple of things. In response to Councillor Cook, actually, we can still be taking in individual actions, right? So, I believe it's a personal responsibility to do what we can to minimise the impact of what we're doing. So there's still that layer. And I think, I guess one of my questions, is how we can, I like the framework and the appendix. So I've leapt forward to how we're going to layer that through our own decisions. It's not always obvious. I guess I'm going to ask you, the fit with our strategic framework that we always get when we've got a paper, I'm interested in how we can build in that framework for climate action into that strategic framework. And I guess that's a council policy decision in the end. But I think there's, building that into what we're doing every time we make a decision, for me is important. So I'd be interested in how you think we can start doing that as quickly as possible, but go slow to go fast. So, thought?
Yeah, I think that the presentation, the focus today is about what we're doing, contributing to that external discussion with our partner agencies. But alongside this, we definitely need to have an internal stream of work that looks at how, which is underway, but it's at the moment mostly relating to the emissions reduction space. But thinking about how we can improve our own best practices around this and reflecting back, like you said, about the strategic framework, and that's just at those early stages at the moment, but hoping to continue that conversation with the Environment Southland Climate Change Subcommittee.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, it's only just come back to my brain, but that particular work stream could actually be a much bigger focus for the subcommittee, because we've spent a lot of time on the measurements and so that would be my request, I guess, is to
the measurements were important to try and make sure that we've got a really good baseline starting point, but we're really needing to get into the point now with the how.
Cool. So I've got two other things, actually. The stakeholder hui that you've got in your timeline, is that going to include secondary schools?
That's a good question.
Or primary schools, for that matter.
We're just looking at finalising venue, and that may be venue dependent in terms of how big that stakeholder hui could be. So once that has been decided, then we'll tidy up what the stakeholder list will look like. But there has been some conversations around whether this would be the right place to engage with secondary schools, or whether we need to be making sure that we tailor it and do it separately. So no decision's been made on that.
Okay. As you can imagine, I've got some thoughts on that. So I'm happy to have that discussion with you later. I think there are ways that you can make that work. And the other question is, you gave us a report a while ago about what's going on in the other regional councils. So I'm just wondering if maybe maybe we can get an update on, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? If somebody's doing some really good stuff, let's grab it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that report, was, you know, a very comprehensive report, was done a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, it
And
doesn't have to be that.
it's something
Doesn't have to be
that
that
we've,
intense.
you know, we continually have referred to over time. But lots of things have also moved on since that report too. So keeping up with colleagues around the country to make sure that we don't reinvent the wheel is definitely a key part of my work as well.
I'm just going to divert the conversation for just a wee minute, because I'm thinking about that action that I didn't do last time before Christmas, Councillor Rodway, about the climate change kind of portal for us. So can I just ask councillors whether they intend that to be just a sharing portal for us for any kind of uncurated random things that we find, or whether you want a more curated, you know, not biased portal, so that I can progress that with the team. Are you just wanting a sharing platform for all the random things that you discover, like I do, or do you want a more curated, professional, scientific kind of portal for us to access?
I was looking for a random, you know, an assigned portal email account or whatever.
Yeah.
We have an email account.
Yeah.
But we don't want to flood that with too many of these kinds of issues, particularly. Well, I do, but others may not.
Yeah, well, I resist the temptation. I find all sorts of things, but I don't share it with everybody because it's
So
kind of not the right
we
place.
lack that, I feel. And I think it would have to be online rather than
Do you want
a
it?
handout.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to be through professional people necessarily. I think it's just well, this is just my thought, an inter-councillor thing, because my view is that it's really important that the councillors have a really up-to-date and holistic view about this issue. I don't think it needs to be curated. Well, and people don't need to read it. They can ignore it if they want to, but I feel the need to have a pot in which to put these suggestions.
Well, it's kind of just a hands up indication of whether you're interested in that, councillors, or not, so that I can progress it, or whether you'd rather. Okay, so the two options are just a random kind of, let's just have a place where we can put all the things that we think people might be interested in, or a more curated, and remembering that these things are all discoverable, of course, so we have to be careful about that, or a more kind of curated, approved, you know, the authenticity of the information is being checked, blah, blah, blah. Thanks. So hands up for option one, which is just kind of like a Dropbox of things that you find that might be interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. I'm going to ask for option two as well, just in case you want that as well, but no. Anybody forget option two? Maybe. Okay. I know there are fish hooks in this, but I just needed to clarify what exactly it was you were asking me to do. So I'll see what I'll talk to staff and the risk people, and see whether there's anything on, you know.
Can I ask a question, right? Obviously, from the other meeting, on the purpose of it, I'm not sure there's a great value in just having something that's for the councillors around this room. I would have thought we want it to be a bit wider than that, and the things that are actually happening.
Yeah, so let me cogitate on that and talk with staff and the risk people and see what options I can bring. Councillor Pemberton?
If it's just about collating information, sharing ideas, why wouldn't we be bolder in trying to drag in the other councils or councillors? I know that's a bit long stretch, but I just think we need to start connecting some way, and that could be one way of doing it.
Can I just direct some of you to the Tasman? I'll share the link because they've got a really good climate action kind of a group that sits alongside some of the. I'll share it. Here we go. But yes, that's a good point, and the not reinventing the wheel conversation. Councillor Guyton, just last thing because we need to move on. Sorry.
Chairman Horrell's, Chairman Horrell's point, rather than other people reading all the stuff we've thrown into this swirling pot, maybe when the council discusses what we've been sharing, we could pull out some things which are particularly interesting, would be of share value to share around, that we all agree would be something that we'd quite like to broadcast from our own kind of searches.
Understood.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it
I don't know
does.
quite how that would work, but
No, me neither, that's what I'm going
filter
for.
it down and then offer it to some other groups.
So let me see how I can progress
Yeah,
that
you just
without,
don't mind
without it
doing it.
becoming a risk to everybody or nobody or whatever. I'll work on that, thank you. So back to the recommendations. Have you got it, do you feel you've got sufficient feedback on the item?
Yeah, all feedback at this stage is very welcome. So if there are any further thoughts that come to you after this meeting, I'd still be really keen to hear. And also just to note, this isn't going to be the only opportunity to input, but this is the key early stage opportunity for input. We're hoping that we are at this crunchy stage, so we're hoping it's really going to start coming together, and that the next time you see this document, it's going to look a lot more, like a document.
Great, I think that's a really good step, and I appreciate how hard it is to get that layer right. Somebody like to move the recommendations, please, after that. Thank you, Councillor Evans, seconded Chairman Horrell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, and I'll try and do my homework as swiftly as I can. 9.6 is the group update. Report by the author name. Made me laugh.
So it's a report from across the group. Liz and Marcus probably have the bulk of the content this time around, so if you've got any questions, we're happy to ask those. Dave may have some as well.
There is, as you see, yeah, we did write this report as a group, so that's why there's more than one of us sitting up here.
Nice, I like that you're working as a team, that we all like that.
And Karen as well. So yeah, if there's a whole lot of different topics raised in this, so it's probably quite difficult to do a summary of a summary, but if there's any questions that you have.
Questions, folks? I'm going to start, and then Chairman Horrell's going to do next. The efficiency and effectiveness of the Southland Regional Policy Statement, which is behind schedule. How are we going to fix that?
Through the Chair, we've got a draft at the moment, so we're just reviewing the draft and providing feedback. So the intention is to have that pretty well closed out by the end of March. It was due to be end of last year, but there's submissions and bits and pieces that took priority. So you're certainly onto it, but yeah, I'm aware of its key importance to guide the future RPS.
So when will we see that? Will we see that in March or will we see that April?
End of March.
Great. Thank you. Chairman Horrell, you're next.
It's just a query on the local government water services amendment bill. Is this the one that was advocating $1.30 a head of population to set up a group that we're going to look over our shoulders, or not? Was that one still coming? It was, to me, it was unnecessary duplication and centralisation of the board. The water services entity set rules that regional councils would actually have to enforce. That there would be no need for another layer, say, above it. So is that in this bill, or is that the one that's still coming?
There was another bill that was the water charges bill that was separate to this one. This one was about setting up the water services entities and working through that process. So we have made a submission which closed on Friday last week, and we've just heard back that we, as of this morning, that we have been successful in making our way through that process to speak to the select committee on that one, should we choose to. So yeah, certainly can head down that path.
When's that select committee going to be? Sorry.
It's around the 13th, 12th or 13th of March.
So just to be really clear, Marcus, we had the discussion, I think, while you were out of the room around the bill, the RM bill and the select committee process coming out there. This is a separate select committee process.
Correct. And there's also
we heard on Friday that we got selected for the offshore renewable energy bill as well. So we've got three potential select committee appointments that are all about that 10th, or the 10th, 11th, 12th of March. So we're just not sure whether we'll be able to get to all three, but yeah, it's only just hot off the press on the emails that have been circulated to Rachel and everybody yet. I think there's certainly a good strike rate with submissions at the moment.
Well, go us, but whew. Any other questions? I just had one about the regional consultation under the new speed rule. That's the Milford Sound conversation, isn't it? How do we actually feel about that? Do we want 80 k's or 100 k's? Does it matter to us?
80 k's, 100 k's is an invitation, not
Oh, I thought so, but I don't know the road as well as some.
lack of ability of the road.
We are doing a joint Otago just to indicate maybe 80 k sounds pretty good. Is it just a bit?
Yeah, that's my understanding is that the regional.
It's a pretty dangerous road, isn't it?
drafting a submission
It's like-
on it.
Great, so that's, yep, okay.
They're really driving
Answers
us
my
to
question. Any other questions for the team? Thank you, councillor Roy, seconded by councillor Gibson. All those in favour, please say aye. Yes, carried. Thank you. May the force be with you. Next team. 9.7 is the, have I got that right or have I missed one? Oh, that's right. The councillor requesting actions. Rachel.
Yeah, so this is the capture of actions from previous meetings, noting we need to add the action discussed earlier in the meeting. I would note, following the strategic session and discussion the other day, that we're finalising the workshop schedule for the year at the moment to reflect council priorities, and that will come through shortly.
Great. It's a bit tricky. Councillor Gotchen.
Yeah, good idea, working well.
Right. It's nice. Nice to have some positive feedback. And as discussed twice already, that portal I'll investigate.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Cook.
I'll second.
Thank you, councillor Evans. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. We have no extraordinary or urgent business, and we have no public excluded. So, kia whakara tapu, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia wātia ai te ara homie huie tai kie. Thank you very much.
How did the AF8 meeting go?